So the next scene, we've got June, Luke, Emily, Moira, and Rita back at home, dishes and wine glasses, and everyone is talking about June's efforts to try to get Fred back to Gilead. And Luke is like all down with it. He thinks that this is actually going to happen. He's like, yeah, he'll get a trial there and he could end up in jail. And Emily's like, yeah, the colonies, and, he won't be free, but he'll still be alive. And Rita's kind of like, well, a trial is pretty cool. We like that. It's justice. And Moira is on team, I don't give a fuck. Just make him gone. I have spent way too much of my life thinking about him. I get it, girl. I get it. And June starts talking to Emily. She's like, I want him to be afraid. Because I was afraid for so long. And Emily is absolutely picking up what June is putting down here. This is where the meeting of the minds happens. And Emily's like, well, how afraid do you want him? And June's like, well, let's just fantasize about this. Let's lean into it. Like, I want him to feel the way that I felt when I was in the woods, when I was running for my life with my daughter. I want Fred to know that. And then Emily's like, we could do you one better, honey. And June's like, you know what? You're right. I want him scared to death. Meanwhile, Luke is over here like, oh, I'm uncomfortable with all of this. Literally all of this. The women plotting vengeance. The women in my life plotting vengeance against the menfolk. Not that he was thinking that, but he was definitely scared. And women being violent, for some reason, scares the shit out of men. Who would have thunk?
Seriously. Yeah, that's exactly what I got from that was just like, whoa, like he seemed really uncomfortable with the amount of anger that June was putting out there, and it was really still very tempered.
Absolutely. And I think that shows just how far Luke had has to go to understand her trauma and really wrap his head around it. Is that like hearing her vocalize this, was that jarring for him? Like, he should have already had an understanding at this point that she felt this way, that she had this anger, this frustration, this like rage inside of her. So this for me was like definitely very telling of like how far Luke had to come with his understanding of June's emotions. And I think like as he like sort of looks up, he's like, oh, I've grossly underestimated how she feels. And like seeing that sort of like wash over his face while like in a sort of a fuzzy like back set. But aside from Luke, I so genuinely adored that June and Emily were unflinchingly looking at each other. And because in season 1 and season 2, there's, even in season 3, they do touch on this as well, that there's a focus with the handmaids that they have to learn how to communicate without words. They have to learn how to communicate through eyes, through their looks, gestures, like hints, nods, all of these things. And June and Emily are so well versed with this, not just because of living in Gilead for so long, but because of these interactions that they've had with each other, that they understand each other inherently, unflinchingly, that Emily agrees that that Fred should be scared to death, and June understands that Emily agrees without a single word transpiring between the two of them.
You're right. It's almost like when they were in the bus, like with the handmaid mobile before the train incident. Is that same kind of like thing? Like in the bus, they weren't saying anything to each other, but their eyes spoke everything. And then here, they weren't saying much of anything, but their eyes were saying everything to each other, and they got it.
And Emily was egging her on. Like, she was pushing her towards the edge in a really interesting way. Like, for all the talk we had about like June just kind of like pushing Emily off that cliff, and in the last episode where, June really forced Emily to confront things that she may or may not have been ready for. And it's kind of like Emily's doing a very similar but slightly more gentle way of it, of how mad exactly, how afraid do you want to, really more afraid than that? Like, I mean, that's the tip of the iceberg, June. Like, let's lean into this anger, like she really does encourage June to really lean in to her anger.
If you think about it, Emily kind of is the one who has committed murders because she was fucking pissed. Okay, like so when she attacked, or well, she didn't murder Aunt Lydia, but she certainly fucking tried. Girl, you tried, and I props. So she didn't succeed, but she tried, and it was really just sprung out of anger. The same thing with the Guardian. That was like such a completely like just one off, like random, like, whoa, okay, you're just gonna, we're gonna steal this car, and then consequences be damned, here we go. Like, oh shit, that's his head. Like,
But
yeah.
But that was the exact same thing. That was just her rage bubbling over.
Yes.
It became untenable for her. And I feel like she's really seeing the same thing in June. And there's no one else in this scene specifically that is on the same page with June besides Emily.
Yep. Absolutely. These two have an inherent understanding of exactly how much Gilead can take from you because they had spent so long there and endured so many absurd traumas. Each of them different, but ultimately with the same goal in mind, to just whittle them down to nothing. And you see, I feel like Emily has also been sort of like a driving factor in pushing June towards becoming who she was in the first place. I feel like as we've seen in season 1 and season 2, Emily was sort of the first to start doing all of these things, and they inspired June to become who she is. So Emily sort of goading her on at this point is just like, yeah, no, feel that rage. Like, you helped me feel that rage. I'm going to help you feel that rage now too, and understand that you need this to feel better.
Yeah, you're right. Like, June's situations have really only been very measured responses. Like, she has actively chosen to participate in the things that she has done. And, the consequences, you just got to figure out what happens. I mean, you're in a life or death survival situation, whatever. When she killed Winslow, that, again, life or death situation, it was absolutely self-defense. You can't say it was going to be anything different. Emily has like actively taken upon herself to be like, you know what? We're just going to do this and we're going to kill this person, or we're at least going to lash out at them really fucking angrily because she can't hold back anymore. So I feel like it's an interesting like melding of two different approaches to this situation.
That's a great point. Yeah, you're right.
You know what this means too? We're going to get more Emily next season. I am sure of it. I don't know what's going to happen to Emily, but I know she's sticking around. I feel it.
Yep. But we'll save predictions for another episode.
No, I'm just giddy.